Hi, I'm Brenda Such. Welcome to COIPcast, where we talk about the trends or just interesting happenings in online education. As an instructor creating or teaching an online course, how do you choose the best educational tools to use? Today, we are with Nico Rose, Assistant Provost and Instructor in the UF College of Health and Human Performance, to tell us about his experience. Welcome to COIPcast, Nico.
Thanks, Brenda. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. So, to set up our time together, we're going to be going over 3 segments where we want to get to know you. We want to get to know the past, present, and future experiences that you've had with online education. So in our first segment, we have something called the digital origin story, DOS for the older folks watching this podcast. Do you remember when your first experience with online education was?
Yeah, so there's 2 dimensions I can think about this from. The first, as a student. So that first experience actually is a vivid memory. It was the mid-2000s at Florida State University, and I vividly remember the course, actually. It was Introduction to Hospitality and Tourism Management, and it was the first time I ever saw online courses pop up in the search, and I remember seeing it and thinking, this is odd. This is something I've never done before. And at the time, I was working 2 jobs on campus, and I couldn't find a course that fit within the traditional fixed meeting time. So I thought, all right, let's give this online course a try. And that was my first exposure as a student.
Okay. And then the second?
Yeah, so then the second, as a faculty member. Back when I was at Florida International University, the first course I ever taught when I started teaching was Hospitality Pathway to Success, which at the time was a combination of UF's version of SLS, but from the perspective of hospitality. So different career readiness, soft skill prep was covered in that course, and it was delivered online. So the first time I ever taught was online as well.
So in both of those experiences, do you remember feeling nervous, excited, or kind of what was your mentality going into those?
So as a student, the first time I enrolled in an online course, it honestly was confusing. Online was just gaining traction at the time. There were not a lot of offerings. And unfortunately, at that point in time, we didn't have nearly the amount of educational technology tools we have today. So as far as what was in the LMS, at the time, I believe it was Blackboard, it pretty much was limited to pre-recorded videos, a handful of PowerPoint slides, and then some papers and tests. And even from the mid-2000s to when I started teaching online courses in 2016, it's been beyond impressive to see how rapidly this area has advanced. From just those somewhat primitive, I guess you could argue, pedagogical perspectives for online education, to the different tools and approaches that we started seeing in the mid-2010s.
Wow, mid-2010s. Now
it doesn't feel that long ago, but when you think about it,
that's like a decade ago.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Okay. So, okay. Good. So that gives us an idea of where young Nico was when he started online education. Now, in the present, though, in your experiences, especially as an instructor with the College of Health and Human Performance, you're in your courses. How do you identify an area that needs educational tools? And we'd like to segue this into our second segment of Bits and Bytes. And Bytes is BYTES for those listening, so that we can kind of start diving into some of those educational tools that you're here and you've been using to talk about.
Absolutely. So the 2 courses that I alternate teaching between right now with the College of Health and Human Performance are LAI 2181, which is Leisure and Contemporary Society, and LAI 3360, which is the Introduction to Hospitality Management course that most of those students take. My approach for both of those courses, also noting I recently redesigned both of those courses with the team here at COIP. Yes. My approach really when identifying where will tools benefit the learning experience really boils down to 3 different fundamental areas that I focus on. The first has to do with portions of the course or the content that would benefit from enhanced peer-to-peer collaboration. So not necessarily one-way delivery from me to the course, but really trying to holistically engage the learning community. The second has to do with opportunities where additional educational technology tools might be able to bridge a bit of the gap between theoretical perspectives and historical perspectives, which are often presented in great detail in textbooks, with what's going on currently in a number of these industry sectors, realizing that industry and the economy and, so many things outside of higher education are rapidly modernizing and shifting, oftentimes at a rate much quicker than a lot of the traditional materials we use in courses are advancing. And then finally, the third area has to do with identifying opportunities where tools integrated into the course might provide an opportunity for students to better understand or engage with content that at some times can be a bit dense. And the main thing, which I believe we'll talk about in just a moment, that I really deploy that for has to do with achieving comprehensive and full understanding of peer-reviewed journals.
Okay. So I think the first one you were talking about, whether the students are engaging peer-to-peer, interacting with content, I think we can look at your course together and go over some of these tools to address either the peer-to-peer or the dense content that you've talked about, or even that third item of modernizing things as well. Or modernizing content for students. So I see here we're looking at PlayPosit.
Yes.
And how did you hear about PlayPosit? I mean, it might have been something that we told you about. But I guess how did you yourself, hearing about it, learn, accept it, use it in your course?
Absolutely. So I first heard about PlayPosit probably 3 or so years ago. That being said, at the time when I heard about it, it was not something I wanted to engage with.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
At first approach, it was, oh my goodness, another tool or software that I'm going to have to learn how to use, which in that moment, it was a bit scary. It wasn't necessarily a journey I was ready to embark on. But luckily, as I've become more comfortable and more familiar with some of the other tools that I've been using over the years, I was ready to take the next step and start engaging with this particular tool. As far as kind of why is it used here, right? Why is it used in this course? Why did I decide to use it in this particular module, as well as some of the others? In a lot of the other courses that I've taught before that have lecture videos that are produced in consultation with learning design teams, there really wasn't a mechanism within the course itself for me to easily and accurately assess if students are actually engaging with that content and following through to the end of the delivery. Additionally, we talk a lot about how the traditional lecture style approach in in-person courses with one-way delivery is generally not always the best way to create a learning environment and to exchange and share ideas. And why would it be any different for an online delivery of a lecture? So that really was the other point here, was to create an opportunity for the learners to engage with the lecture itself versus just passively watching it.
So then this is a tool that you've obviously employed with your videos, your lecture videos in your course. So some of the other tools, Perusall, and I think you've brought that up to my attention before about using Perusall for that dense content, those journal articles. Maybe we can look at that together and how you've used it in your course.
Absolutely. So I guess let's start with a broad discussion of Perusall.
Yeah, sure.
So Perusall actually is a tool I had not have heard of until within the last 1 to 2 semesters. And I initially learned of it speaking with some colleagues in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences when they were discussing this super new tool that they enjoyed using that was incorporated into their course. Going back to some of those overarching considerations of kind of when, why, and where did I decide to use these tools, Perusall really helps address 2 of those key things, those key points that I was focusing on. One has to do with making very complicated or dense information more accessible for students, and we'll talk through how Perusall supports that in just a moment. And then the second has to do with creating that peer-to-peer interaction and collaboration within the online learning community. And Perusall, once again, is an excellent tool for that.
Tick the boxes.
Yes. So here we're back in Module 10. You can obviously tell in this course, Module 10 is an action-packed experience for the week.
Stay tuned until Module
Right?
No,
Find
no,
out more.
definitely
But here, for this particular activity in Module 10, there is a peer review journal that was identified that really was examining a number of transformative happenings in the hospitality and tourism sector following the COVID-19 pandemic, which we know that really fundamentally changed a number of industry sectors and economic norms, you could even argue, but
in that industry,
especially for the hospitality industry. So this particular peer review journal, it has lots and lots of important information and study findings, but it was a bit longer than I wanted it to be. And some of the terminology and the way it was presented, you could argue might be slightly above the level that you would expect in an undergraduate course. But that being said, the value of the information that is in that particular journal aligned perfectly with what we're trying to do here. So introduce Perusall. So by uploading and linking that peer review journal to Perusall, we've really established two things now. So one, being able to deconstruct that very dense material. Throughout Perusall, and there's also two ways that I've been using Perusall, but throughout Perusall, I can flag different parts of the journal and add my own annotations to help with the understanding and I think also the impact of some of the information that's being shared in that particular piece. But also as students are engaging with it and come to a particular part of the paper that they might not understand or know exactly what's going on, they're able to highlight it and tag certain points and specifically identify either I don't understand this, I don't really understand what the key point of this piece is, and post it on a wall within Perusall. Think about it's set up almost like Facebook, right? You can comment, you can like stuff, you can ask questions. So through this tool now, it's almost like a social media experience with how we're engaging with the instructional content. Students are able to ask questions of each other, identify areas they don't understand, and rather than just the instructor being the one that's contributing to the learning experience, the entire class community is now able to do that. Students are able to answer each other's questions, provide their own perspectives, ideas, or experiences in response to certain parts of the piece that other students might not have otherwise directly engaged with in terms of life experiences before, or may not have understood the content.
So when you were talking earlier, you brought up the matter of modernization, and it sounded like bridging some gaps between some historical content versus maybe some things new, especially like even when we did that other example with I believe PlayPosit with the COVID-19. What other tools have you used to kind of help with bridging the gap there?
Yeah, so to kind of bridge the gap and modernize the delivery of what we're doing. So like I mentioned before, the rate of change of many things oftentimes outpaces what we're doing in the curriculum, as well as a number of textbook publishers' ability to update and enhance the information that's being presented. This, once again, is another perfect opportunity, right, to introduce additional educational technology tools. And in the context of what you just asked, two tools that I've been using are LinkedIn Learning and Tipsy. So in the context of this particular part of the course here, we're in Module 6 now. And in this module, this is really an inflection point in the course. Prior to this point, modules 1 through 5 were focusing a lot on different philosophical perspectives and the history of leisure and society, and how a lot of this started dating back to the earliest record keeping that we are aware of and have access to through semi-modern day, looking at kind of the impact of leisure and the evolution of it. In this particular module, we start to shift gears and start leaving the historical philosophical approach to leisure and society and transitioning over to the organizational structure of the leisure system. So the different sectors that are associated with it, how they all work together, and really what are the nuts and bolts of all of these different leisure-oriented service sectors. Going through that exercise, I realized there's a bit of a gap. The textbook and a number of the resources that we've included within this particular module did a good job at talking about the leisure service delivery system, which is the organizational model in which leisure experiences are identified with associated responsible parties in a number of different taxonomies and then are delivered to whoever the audience is with a number of different objectives, depending on which type of leisure engagement we're looking at. The book did a decent job talking about how this needs to be approached as a system, but didn't really get to the next step of introducing this concept of systems thinking, which in the context of the leisure industry and the associated subsectors within it, systems thinking is largely what makes all of this work. This is a network of very interconnected and woven systems, businesses, practices that obviously all work together. And systems thinking is the overarching thing that enables that engine to go forward, right? So this was an opportunity where there was a bit of a gap with what the practical takeaway piece is versus the information that was delivered in the textbook materials.
So how did you, I mean, no, I think LinkedIn is as common as Facebook now, but what, I guess, drew you to LinkedIn Learning or Tipsy as a piece to your course? Like, how did you, I guess, when did that connection happen for you as an instructor?
So I'd say the first connection utilizing some of these tools was probably back in 2018, 2019 at FIU. Both Florida International University as well as here at UF provide access to all of our students to be able to engage with the different courses and individual videos that are hosted through LinkedIn Learning. So I initially became aware of it because I got a fun email that said, we all have access to this now. And I think at the time it was called Lynda. I think it was lynda.com or something before it was acquired and folded in. And I thought, that's kind of cool. I'll check that out one day. And that one day came and I was thumbing through it and I was very impressed with the scope of content that's within there, but then also the frequency at which stuff is updated is pretty on point.
Right. So you're not dealing with old information.
Exactly. And there's new modern iterations of a number of different life and society oriented topics that are applicable to a number of different situations, but overlay on top of specific course content really, really well. So that's when I kind of started this approach. And I've refined it a bit over the years, making sure there's clear alignment. And I think the part I was missing at the onset to this was clearly articulating to the students, why are we doing these extra things right here versus just sticking to the textbook? But that's really how it's all come together. I will say one of the other things I really like about LinkedIn Learning, a lot of the delivery of the content is from the perspective of industry practitioners, which can also provide a different perspective or approach to a number of the content items that I'm delivering in the course.
That's good, yeah. Absolutely. The students aren't like, oh, I'm just learning this. It's not going to happen in the real world.
Correct.
Right.
Those experiences provide modern real-world examples and applications of a number of these different topics. Not to mention, when the students complete their LinkedIn Learning exercise, they receive a certificate of completion, which the way that this is structured, that's the primary thing that they're uploading into Canvas. And then for some of them, there's some supplemental reflection or discussion questions that I attach to the submission to clearly articulate the connection between what is in the LinkedIn Learning course, what is in the lecture videos or the textbook, and why are we doing all these things together, and why is it important?
That really helps. So then as we enter into our last segment called Enter or Delete. It's
a fun name.
Enter or Delete. like what you've talked about, choosing things to add to your course. Now, just in general, online education or technology, what is something or things that you think could be added to maybe more conversations related to online education? Or maybe there's something already in the conversation that you're like, well, I think we should maybe delete that. So in your experience, even just your personal opinion, what do you think?
For an ad, I think we're on the cusp of seeing a lot more native generative AI plugins within courses. And I think that might end up being kind of the next big thing in this space and will fundamentally change the online learning experiences as we know it. A lot of the different educational technology tools up to this point help with content delivery and interaction and collaboration. I think the use of different generative AI systems within a course as a tool is really taking this to the next dimension. And I'll give you a few examples. And there's actually some team members here at the university that are working on this right now. Traditionally, office hours are a day or two a week from a fixed time. Right. And we know in the context of online learning and adult learners and non-traditional learners, Monday through Friday standard business hours does not always work.
People
right?
aren't going to make
we know
it.
that.
Right.
Generative AI systems, though, now introduce the opportunity for there to be feedback, engagement, support, and questions 24/7 within the Canvas shell at a time that works for the student whenever the student needs it.
I'm going to need that in other tools in my life too, like applications, the bank.
You're right, if only. But, I really think that's going to be the next big ad.
Okay.
Now, granted, the things that you need to power these systems are complicated, vast, and dynamic. And I don't think within the relative near future, we're going to see mass scaling of these types of things. But I mean, even some of the pilot projects that we're working on here at the university provide almost office hours type support to students in those intervals when they might not be able to actually get to office hours.
It's a start. It's a start.
Yeah, so I think that's probably going to be the next big one. Okay. Granted, with great power comes great responsibility. So there's a number of different, data considerations and ethical use considerations that would be associated with tools like that. But I think that's probably the next big ad.
Well, thank you, Nico, for joining us. That is good information for us to know for the future, to consider. I really appreciate how you consider the human experience as well. We've enjoyed getting to know you, getting to know how you practice in your course. And we really hope that the listener, too, can be able to take these points and consider them and use them in your course and maybe even just how you might then take it to the next level. So thank you. Thank you all for watching and listening, and until next time.